Special thanks to Horizon Therapeutics for sponsoring today's Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Working tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics' mission at horizontherapeutics.com.
How do I make sure that my wife and I get time to ourselves? You know, it's her desire was like, oh, I got to take care of him. I got to be around him. I'm the only one that fully understands him and can help him. I'm like, he'll be okay if someone else watches him for a bit. We need to have our relationship as the foundation of this family. And let's not forget that.
That's our guest this week, entrepreneur Chris Jones. Chris has two boys, Trey and Derek, who has DCB, Dyspraxia optic glioma. We'll hear about Chris, his family, and how he loves to coach people on this Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Say hello to David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad to dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
And now let's hear this fascinating conversation between Chris Jones and David Hirsch.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Chris Jones of Calgary, Canada, who's the father of two boys, a successful serial entrepreneur, and founder of Strategic Traction, a coaching business, which is part of the EOS, or Entrepreneurial Operating Systems Worldwide. Chris, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You and your wife, Yolanda, have been married for 23 years and are the proud parents of two boys, Trey, 14, and older brother Derek, 17, who was born prematurely and, after some misdiagnoses, was diagnosed with DCD, Developmental Coordination Disorder, also known as Dyspraxia. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Sure. Calgary boy, born and raised, third generation actually. Both my families are from this area. I was the oldest of three boys, and we moved to the countryside just outside of Calgary when I was 5 and grew up there, spent my entire childhood in the country. I moved to a ton of fun. We had the gift of living on this acreage in the Pritis area. It is just the most beautiful area. We had a toboggan hill and a creek running across the property, and we could ski on it and hike on it, and it's just gorgeous. We were caretakers of a place that, we had a tennis court and paved driveways, and it was quite an incredible place to grow up on.
Yeah, well, I imagine you and your brothers must have spent a fair amount of time outdoors then.
We did. Yeah, there were big fields, like sports fields, like big 6 acres of lawn that one of our job was to cut the lawn, which was great because it gave us a lot of areas to throw a baseball or a football and play soccer and run around and do whatever we wanted to do. It was amazing. Build forts in the trees, and the toboggan hill even had like a drainage ditch running across the toboggan hill, which created a natural jump. And so we didn't even have to dig or take a shovel out to make a jump.
So I'm curious to know, what did your dad do for a living?
He was a teacher and an entrepreneur. He had a small cabinet making business, and my mom refinished antique furniture. She did the finishing on his new work and did the refinishing on older furniture.
Excellent. So I'm sort of curious to know, how would you describe your relationship with your dad?
Oh, yeah, really good. I was always considered a carbon copy of my dad. We looked the same. We talked the same. By the time I was 14, I could pretend I was him on the phone, and family members wouldn't know the difference. And had a lot of similarities in the way we did things and the way we acted and stuff, and that was interesting. He coached me in basketball and taught me in school, and had a math course with him, and we drove to and from school, which is a half-hour drive each way all through my high school. And so that was quite an amazing experience. Challenging at times because we were very close. When he was teaching me, coaching me, and driving to and from, we managed to survive that pretty well and got pretty close. Yeah, pretty good relationship with him for sure. And then 2 years ago, to the day, he had a stroke. 69 years old, and he's in a wheelchair in a long-term care facility now. He's got dementia, vascular dementia. So life is short, my friend. It's a very different relationship now. That's been a difficult one to navigate.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. My first thought was the apple didn't fall very far from the tree based on all the similarities that you had. And I was very saddened to learn about your dad's stroke and conditions he's in currently. And 69 seems relatively young.
Oh, yeah.
Frighteningly young. So my heart reaches out to you and your family as it relates to what's going on with your dad. I'm sort of wondering if you're reflecting on the relationship with your dad and the role model that he has been, if there's an important takeaway or two that come to mind, a lesson learned or something that you've tried to incorporate into your own parenting or fathering.
Yeah, we had a fairly significant family event when I was 24. My 19-year-old brother passed away in a car accident. And obviously pretty traumatic. I'm the oldest of 23 cousins, first cousins on my mom's side. And my one grandpa died when I was 1.5, so I didn't know him. But other than that, no one else in my family had passed away. And my youngest brother goes. And so that was quite the journey as a family that we had to go through. We ultimately came to the point where, it became pretty obvious pretty fast that things wouldn't be left unsaid. A lot more hugs, a lot more I love yous. Life is short and let's embrace that journey for what it is. I think that helped all of us get a little bit closer through that journey. And when we'd have challenges, we'd just speak about them, as uncomfortable as it might be.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing, and very sorry to hear about your younger brother passing at such a young age as well. So let's switch gears, talk about special needs. So I'm sort of curious to know, what is Derek's diagnosis and how did it come about?
So my wife is a public health nurse and deals with moms and new babies. So you want to talk about armed with tools, she is well armed with that kind of thing. And so she assesses babies right after they go home. And moms make sure everything's okay. So we had our baby, and within hours, she's like, yeah, this kid's got delays. And then he had some eye issues and, but just the way he used his hands and the way his eye, he looked and the way he moved his body, there was something that she could tell was delayed right out of the gate. So that was the danger of having someone in the medical profession. They know stuff very quickly. Anyway, so then the eyes were something very noticeable. They shaked and they shifted to the side, and we go to see some doctors about this, and they ask us to come in, and they give us a diagnosis that he has optic glioma. Of course, I knew nothing what this was, and actually neither did my wife, Yolanda. But Yolanda, being who she is, she says, well, I'm going to go find out what that means. And so she goes and researches it. And optic glioma is a thickening of the optic nerve. It typically leads to blindness by the age of 12, and the kids often don't live beyond 20, something to this nature. So here we are with a brand new baby at home. He's 5 weeks premature. So we spend the first week in the hospital in prenatal care. And then we go home and they're like, well, look, don't expose your kid to the outside world because he was born at 4 pounds, 3 ounces. He doesn't have a lot of constitution. By the way, you now got this diagnosis. So we were like, instead of celebrating the birth of our new kid, we're almost in a period of mourning and isolated. I'm like, okay, don't see anybody. And, your kid's probably going to die before he's 20.
Yikes.
It was a really strange position to be. And as we came to grips with this on our own, I mean, Skype was barely even a thing. Zoom wasn't around, and FaceTime I don't think we even had iPhones back then. So we were, phone calls with friends and family, but that got old fast. And so we're just really the three of us at home dealing with this. And we eventually just came to the realization of like, well, this is not great, but this is a wonderful little baby. He's super brilliant and tons of fun. And we could sit and mourn what might happen in the future, or we could just say, you know what, we're going to embrace every moment for what it is. Life is short. And so we chose that path. And as he grew and his health and constitution increased and everything, then it's like, okay, you can go more about being normal-ish parents. We go to see the doctors again. They're like, oh, by the way, our diagnosis was wrong. Your kid's just going to need eye surgery at some point, but he's going to live a normal, healthy life. We're like, oh, okay, well, we're kind of through the hard part of this, but thanks for letting us know. And I wish you wouldn't have told us anything in the first place. It sent us on quite the journey of having to deal with grief, needlessly. So, not to mention, first kid's always the most shock to the system. And then you end up with this. It was just a real big punch in the face. But we made it through, and we figured our way through it. We figured a way how we were going to go forward. And it ended up being quite a gift in reality. So,
well, it sounds like it was a very challenging experience, to say the least. And unintentionally, what I heard you say is that they brought your expectations way down.
Yeah.
Based on that original misdiagnosis with the benefit of hindsight. And, things just got better and better.
Yeah.
It's not as if they're typical or normal, if you will, but they were a lot better than what the original expectations were. So what is the diagnosis and how did this DCD diagnosis come about?
As things progressed, as he got older, like everything was a little bit delayed. And, my wife, of course, knew a lot of this stuff. And then I knew some child development stuff as well. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I see. I didn't know the ages where they were supposed to do stuff. And she knew that really well. So anyways, as we're like, hey, he's walking late. He talked. There was no problem with the talking. But walking late, just the way he'd move his body, pick up things, grab stuff, turn his head, like all this stuff was delayed. So we're like, yeah, something's going on. My wife was like, yeah, definitely. There's definitely physical delays. So, and then emotionally, there was a lot of emotional things that were challenging as well. There seemed to be emotional development delays as well. So continued to see doctors and specialists and explore what was going on. And eventually by the age of 4, he was diagnosed with Developmental Coordination Disorder, or DCD. In the UK, it's known as Dyspraxia, but everywhere else, DCD, relatively unknown. I would say it's where autism was 30 years ago. So fine and gross motor delays. The muscles in the body, just imagine that there are 10 extra filters that needs to go from the brain to the hand to write your name. Where you and I have one filter, they have 10. And so it just is more exhausting for them to do anything. It's more difficult to teach them. You teach a kid how to swing a bat, pick up a bat, swing it, show them how to transfer a little bit of weight and just get it moving. And you ask one of those kids to do that, and it is the most awkward looking thing. I think we've all grown up with kids around, know people in our lives that they're the kids that, they try and catch a ball and it hit them between the eyes. Like on far too regular basis. I think to any athlete, it happens every now and then when we lose focus, but to them it happens frequently. And they try and do anything and it's just awkward and difficult. And so fine motor, gross motor, so they frequently have eye issues. So they almost always wear glasses, sometimes significant corrections. Their heart muscle isn't as well developed. So they struggle with endurance sports. They struggle with just getting their heart rate up. They get exhausted very, very fast. In addition to the fact they have all these extra filters into anything they're doing through, whether it's swinging a bat, kicking a ball, or writing their name. It's just more tiring to do anything physical for them. And so they withdraw. And they're like, well, they're very aware of what people are doing, and they get embarrassed, I think, quite easily, is what I've seen as a general rule of being around a number of these kids now. So they withdraw because they don't want to be embarrassed. And they don't want to be seen as the person that doesn't know how to do things. And so because they withdraw, they frequently get diagnosed as autistic. So that the symptoms are the same. Many of them present similarly, but the root cause is different. And so then there's commonly misdiagnosis. So he got tested numerous times, and they're like, oh, we think he might be on the spectrum. And my wife would be like, no, it's not, because of this, and this reason. Like, she was such an incredible advocate for him and understood all these different things. But because of the early diagnosis, they actually didn't know what to do with a kid with DCD at the age of 4, because they don't usually get diagnosed till 8 or 9, because children in the school system and people are started, more experts get their eyes on these kids, and they're like, hey, something's up. But so they actually didn't know what to do with him at 4 because my wife assisted so significantly in the early diagnosis. And then to add, there are other diagnoses, but, learning disabilities with the DCD comes emotional and social delays, right? So they're often really awkward socially. There's like an emotional development piece that goes along with it. So, and because of the eye, then he has no depth, very little depth perception and very little peripheral vision. So the poor kid's got to ask him to go like downhill skiing. And that's got to be the most horrifying experience for him. Like, let's go somewhere that I can't tell where I'm going. It's fast. I've got to be able to respond, which I struggle to communicate with my limbs anyways. It's not his favorite sport, let's put it that way. It's pretty terrifying for him.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. And while it took a while to get the diagnosis, it sounds like getting it presented its own challenges, right? Like you said, it is not typically diagnosed at such an early age. And it presents itself, from what you said, similar characteristics to autism. Even though it's different than autism, I'm wondering what the solution is, or the treatments from a physical therapy, occupational therapy, etc. Is it a different regimen for somebody with DCD, or because it presents itself similarly, they're some of the same therapies?
So I can't speak intelligently about therapies for autism, but I can speak about what we've done with Derek. And so we've done social development classes. So through a psychologist and fascinating group that we deal with here in Calgary, and it takes them in groups and videotapes them and teaches them the normal social conventions, because they just don't get that, again, often why they're misdiagnosed as autistic. And so they take them through these classes and help them understand. And sometimes as simple as going to a store, buying something at the store, asking for change, communicating with the clerk at the counter. So occupational therapy, yes, we've done that as well. Physiotherapy, specially designed for this kind of thing, has been helpful. Goodness, you think it's hard to teach your kid how to ride a bike. Some kid dads are really good at teaching their kids and others aren't. And I've had pretty good success with my youngest, Trey. The oldest one is just like brick wall. Dad, I don't want to. He doesn't want to learn from me a lot of times when it comes to anything physical. And a lot of it's to do with the fact that I'm this athlete. Everything I do in my life is a lot of it's so much around athletics. And he's like, Dad, it's intimidating. And I'm not like that, right? So I can say I'm just there to support him, but it's hard for him to accept that help. So you get someone else to teach him. We got someone else taught him how to ride a bike, a physiotherapy group, and they did an amazing job. They understand these kids and how to slowly build it up. We had vision therapy. So he had to learn how to train his eyes and the muscles in his eyes to respond appropriately. He did have surgery at, I think, 3 or 4 on to cut the muscles out so he didn't turn sideways as much. And so that was kind of a crazy thing to put your kid into surgery that young an age. But so corrective there. And then we seek out like educational assistance to deal with the learning disabilities as well. So my cousin actually is a tutor that specializes in executive functioning. And so I think it's fantastic learning for me even as an adult, and the way he teaches how to, use the executive functioning parts of our brain better. But he's phenomenally talented in helping Derek deal with some of the educational challenges. And then different programs, anxiety often tends to go along with this. But there was eventually an anxiety disorder, which if a kid's going to learn and they have anxiety, like you can't learn anything. If you're in the hippocampus, or if you're in the lizard brain, like you can't think if you're in fight or flight mode. And so if you're in a high anxiety state, like you can't learn anything. And so until the anxiety piece was dealt with, his educational experience was super challenging. So eventually we got that diagnosis, which took us a while to figure that out. Again, my wife's super high avocation on that, because she knew like that was driving so many of his behaviors. Like he's in the 99th percentile anxiety in a school situation, which is like super high. So for him to learn anything in school when he's in that state, it's not happening. So learned about that. I forget the question. Repeat for us. Going off on tangents, I feel.
Oh, no. You addressed it head on as far as the types of therapies and, how does that differ from autism? And, you can only speak to what you know about, which is what I heard you say.
Yes.
And it's enlightening. It's very enlightening. Thank you for sharing, Chris. In a prior conversation, you mentioned this woman who is one of the most well-respected people in North America, perhaps in the world. Her name is Dr. Pauline-Kamps, the psychologist who specializes in DCD.
Yes.
And who I did a little homework on is also the author of a book entitled Autism, Exploring the Explosion. So I'm very curious to know more about her, if you can speak to that and the work that she does.
Yeah, so Pauline, she's really focused on this arena and knows the difference, obviously, in writing a book about autism, but recognized there was a faction that was different. And so she ran classes as well of getting these kids together and teaching them how to bowl and teaching them how to talk and socialize together. And then she brought the parents together, which was really cool. We would just drop the kids off at her place and they would do their thing and then we'd pick them up. And then she culminated in a bowling activity together. And all the parents joined the kids and we watched them all bowl together. And that's when I was like, just confounded by the similarities in how these kids acted and moved. And they're bowling, and they had the rails up on the lanes because they couldn't get the ball down the middle. That none of them could. So to get the ball down to the pins, it had to have the rails up. And they were so visibly frustrated with the results that they were getting. They're, throwing their arms and shooting, stomping back to the off the lane. And so I'm just observing, and I'm like, wow, these kids are acting a lot like my son does. And then I'm like, hey, I noticed you're a little frustrated there. Yeah. Like, well, like I know how to bowl fairly well. Would you like any help? They're like, nope, totally no, I'm fine. And it was just the same brick wall. I'm like, oh my God, they're all the same. Completely frustrated with the outcome and not willing to accept help. I think because they felt like they'd be showing weakness. Fascinating.
Yeah, well, Chris, I have to interject because what comes to mind is this image of men generally being lost in their cars. And, that's the way we as a gender have been wired, right? And somehow we need to reprogram ourselves, right, to acknowledge that we have a challenge and be willing to accept some advice, right? And I jokingly say, thank God for GPS. That's probably saved a lot of relationships. It's not that easy, right? When you're talking about a son or a daughter, right? It's not gender specific. Yeah. DCD is not something that only affects boys. It affects girls and boys. And one of the things that I was like stunned by when I was doing my research in preparation for today's interview is that there's been 30 years of research that Dr. Kamps has done. And one of the things that, again, I'm just repeating what I'm reading as opposed to, recalling. Shockingly, DCD affects more than 1 in 20 people.
Oh, yeah.
Which is actually more common than autism.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks that autism is exploding.
Yeah.
It affects something 1 in 60 people. So this is 3 times more prevalent.
Like I said, you and I both had kids in our class that had this. They just didn't know what it was.
And it goes undiagnosed, right?
Yeah.
And all the stuff that flows out from that. So you're in a good place now, but it's not without some trials and tribulation along the way, if I could just summarize what you've said.
Oh, yeah. What a gift, though, because it's taught me to just rethink how I approach so many things in life. And as a teacher and as a coach, I have to significantly change my approach with someone that's wired like that, which gives me the opportunity to connect with other people that, in my professional capacity, I can connect with people that are wired differently now much better because I had to throw out everything that I'd learned as a teacher and as a coach to work with my son and just completely think about it differently and talk to my wife. I'm like, I'm stuck. Like, now what, right?
What I've also heard you saying is that in typical situations, there seems like there's a preferred playbook, right? You just do these things. And, if it's sports related, there's a plan or a path, right, for getting stronger and faster and, honing that skill.
Yes.
That's a typical situation. But if you have an atypical situation, you need to be willing to let go of the way we were taught or brought up ourselves and be able to adapt to the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, just to avoid some of the frustration that goes on and to be more in tune with, what the person's capacity and what their, if I can use the teaching profession, what their style of learning is. Because, we're all wired differently.
Sure.
Understanding that allows you to help somebody help themselves for that matter. So.
Yeah, more tools in the toolbox as a teacher, right? And the goal is not for you to communicate it to them. It's for them to understand it and be able to use it themselves. And that takes different approaches to get there.
That's pretty profound. Thanks for sharing. So unrelated, I remember you telling me that you rode a bicycle from Jasper to Calgary, which I MapQuested that, which is about 250 miles, which seems pretty extreme. And I'm wondering, what was it that led you to do that or motivated you to do that?
Well, I was 8, and it was through the mountains. So there were like mountain passes in there, so it's not just a flat course. My dad asked me, we rode bikes. On the weekend, we had rode bikes at a young age. And he said, do you want to do this ride with me? I'm a teacher. And he was a teacher, and he was leading this group, his junior high group, on this cycling trip. I mean, it took me all of about half a second to say yes. He just said, okay, well, we'll have to train together. I'm like, okay, just tell me what I got to do and we'll go, right? So, yeah, it was a very cool experience.
How many days did that take?
5 days.
Okay.
Longest day was 64 miles, Banff to Calgary.
And how old were you again?
I was 8.
Have you done any road biking since then or not?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love to road bike.
Well, thanks for sharing. It's something we both have in common, is our interest in or enjoyment from bicycling. I know that you're going to enjoy reading my book, which is A Father's Journey to Break the Cycle of Father Absence, which is loosely based on a 21-day ride that I did from Santa Monica to Chicago. And for Canadians, they might not have an appreciation for the distance, but it was a 2,300 plus mile ride in 21 days, or averaging a little bit more than 100 miles a day.
Yeah, that's a big ride.
I'm thinking about advice now, and I'm wondering, beyond what we've discussed, if there's any advice you might share with a dad who finds himself raising a child with different abilities.
Yeah, I think the importance of taking care of not just the kid with the challenges, but those around them. I've had to focus on, how do I make sure that my wife and I get time to ourselves? As her desire was like, I got to take care of him. I got to be around him. I'm the only one that fully understands him and can help him. I'm like, he'll be okay if someone else watches him for a bit. We need to have our relationship as the foundation of this family. And let's not forget that. And so I think the importance of taking care of ourselves and the other relationships are important, as well as the need with the individual. And I had to learn a lot of patience and slowing things down, and just being creative in how I think about things, and really the constant learner, because quote unquote normal doesn't often work.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. It's critically important that you look at the big picture, right? Not just focus on the immediate needs, in this case of your son, but make sure that you're not lost looking at the importance of your relationship with your spouse, other family members, and then taking care of yourself, just so you could, like you said earlier, be healthy and show up. And words of wisdom, thanks. So I'm sort of curious to know, why is it that you've agreed to be a mentor father as part of the Special Fathers Network?
I love to help. There's a reason I'm a coach professionally and a teacher professionally. I love to help others. And so if something that I can do or say can give, or maybe they can hear their own story and mine, fantastic. Experience share and helps us all understand and all learn.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. Thanks for being part of the Special Fathers Network. Let's give our special shout out to our mutual friend, Philip Hartman of Cape Town, South Africa, and creator of Dedicated.com for helping connect us.
Absolutely. Philip's amazing.
So if somebody wants to learn more about Strategic Traction, EOS Worldwide, or contact you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the website, strategictraction.ca, is my site. And eosworldwide.com there's all sorts of free tools on there. And if you want to learn more about that, I'd be happy to chat with you about that. Contact us for them on our website.
We'll be sure to include that in the show notes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Chris is just one of the dads who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father, or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Chris, thanks again.
Thanks for having me today. I love it, the opportunity to get on and share, and great questions. And thanks for doing so much homework in advance. You had some great questions as a result of that work.
And thank you for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, presented by the Special Fathers Network. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for fathers to support fathers. Go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Also, please be sure to register for the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls held on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
The Dad to Dad podcast was produced by Couch Audio for the Special Fathers Network. Thanks again to Horizon Therapeutics, who believe that science and compassion must work together to transform lives. That's why they work tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics at horizontherapeutics.com.